In our previous episode, we stepped into the dimly lit mosque of Kufa. We watched a man, a leader, a figure of early Islam, bowed in prayer, struck down by a poisoned blade. Ali ibn Abi Talib's assassination didn't just end a life, it split Islam. It changed the course of history. But today, we leave the deserts of the 7th century and walk into the glass towers of modern diplomacy. A man enters a consulate. He's not a warrior, he's not a politician, he's a journalist, and he never walks out. This is not ancient history. This is Istanbul, 2018. This is Jamal Khashoggi, and this is the story of how a pen became more dangerous than a sword. Stay with us, because what happened behind those closed doors shook the world and exposed the shadows behind the suits. Welcome to the red pages of history, where truth bleeds quietly and every silence has a witness. He was born in Medina, 1958, raised in the shadow of the Prophet's mosque, in a family close to the Saudi elite. Jamal Khashoggi wasn't an outsider. He was part of the system. He studied journalism in the United States. He admired Western media, its freedom, its scrutiny, its courage, but he returned to Saudi Arabia believing reform could come from within. For decades, he worked as a journalist, editor, and advisor. He interviewed Osama bin Laden, not once, but multiple times before the world knew his name. He covered wars, diplomacy, and royal affairs. He was trusted, respected, connected, but something changed as the Saudi leadership tightened its grip, silencing dissent, jailing critics, and centralizing power under Mohammed bin Salman. Khashoggi grew uneasy. He began to speak out, not with rage, not with slogans, but with questions. He wrote about the need for free expression, accountability, and pluralism. He criticized the war in Yemen, the crackdown on activists, and the disappearance of voices once allowed to speak. He didn't call for revolution, he called for reform. But in a system where loyalty is demanded, even gentle criticism can be seen as betrayal. In 2017, Khashoggi left Saudi Arabia. He settled in Washington, D.C., and began writing for the Washington Post. His columns were thoughtful, measured, and deeply personal. He spoke of love for his country and fear for its future. He became a voice for those who had none, and that made him dangerous. Khashoggi believed that journalism was not the enemy of power, but its conscience. That truth, even when uncomfortable, was necessary. That nations grow not by silencing critics, but by listening to them. He was not a radical. He was not a revolutionary. He was a man with a pen and a belief that words could change the world. But in October 2018, that belief met a wall, a consulate, a team, and a silence that still echoes. It was a mild afternoon in Istanbul, October 2nd, 2018. The sun filtered through the trees lining the street. Traffic hummed. Tourists passed by, unaware of what was about to unfold behind the walls of the Saudi consulate. Jamal Khashoggi, dressed in a dark blazer, walked toward the entrance. He looked calm, focused. He had come to collect documents for his upcoming marriage, a routine visit, or so he thought. His fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, waited outside. She watched him enter. She expected him back in minutes. Inside, the air was cool. The marble floors gleamed. The reception desk was quiet. But the building wasn't empty. 15 men had arrived earlier that day, flown in from Riyadh, some on private jets, some with diplomatic clearance. They weren't consular staff. They were operatives, trained, prepared. They had brought tools, bone saws, syringes, gloves. They had rehearsed. They had a plan. As Khashoggi stepped inside, he was greeted politely, led down a hallway, into a room. The door closed. What happened next was captured, according to Turkish intelligence, on audio recordings. The sound of voices, then a struggle. Khashoggi was grabbed, restrained. A voice told him to be quiet. He resisted, he pleaded. An injection followed, a sedative, or perhaps something stronger. Within minutes, his body went limp. He was dead, but the operation wasn't over. The team moved quickly. One man, A forensic expert began the dismemberment, methodical, silent, piece by piece. Plastic sheets were laid out, gloves were changed. The body was packed and handed to a local collaborator, someone tasked with disposal. Meanwhile, outside, Hatis waited. Minutes turned to hours. She called his phone. No answer. She asked the guards. They said he had left, but he hadn't. Inside the consulate, cleaning was underway, evidence erased, tools packed. The team prepared to leave. By nightfall, the operatives were gone. Some flew back to Riyadh, others disappeared into the city, and Jamal Khashoggi, journalist, critic, fiancé, had vanished. Jamal Khashoggi's murder wasn't just a crime, it was a global rupture. The Saudi government first denied everything, then claimed he had left the consulate, then admitted he died, but blamed a rogue team. The story kept changing, but the facts didn't. The CIA concluded that Mohammed bin Salman had likely ordered the operation. The UN called it a premeditated extrajudicial killing. World leaders condemned the act. Yet many stopped short of action. Arms deals continued. Diplomatic ties remained. And the question lingered. How far can a regime go before the world says, enough? Inside Saudi Arabia, trials were held behind closed doors. 5 men were sentenced to death. Others were acquitted. Later, the death sentences were pardoned by Khashoggi's children. Justice, some said, was buried with him. Outside, the impact was seismic. Journalists around the world rallied. Media outlets demanded accountability. Human rights organizations called for sanctions. Khashoggi's name became a symbol, not just of repression, but of resistance. His death reignited debates about freedom of speech and state violence. It also raised questions about the role of Western democracies in enabling authoritarian regimes. It exposed the fragility of international norms, and it reminded us that even in embassies, places meant for diplomacy, silence can be deadly. Jamal Khashoggi wasn't a revolutionary. He wasn't armed. He didn't call for overthrow. He asked questions. He wrote words, and for that, he was erased. But his voice didn't vanish. It echoed in headlines, in protests, in every journalist who dares to speak truth to power. If this story moved you, if you believe truth should never be silenced, no matter the cost, then subscribe to the red pages of history. Behind every closed door, behind every vanished voice, there's a story worth telling, and we're here to tell it.